Assalamualaikum and good day everyone. In this video I'll be talking about data collection using the questionnaire. The learning outcome: upon completion of this session, you should be able to explain the need to use questionnaire as a data collection technique for your research, and you should be able to discuss the differences of various types of questions that can be integrated into a questionnaire. Number 3, you should be able to differentiate the differences between a pre-testing and a pilot testing. For questionnaire development, there is a stage where you have to do pre-tests as well as pilot tests. So you are expected to be able to differentiate between pre-test and pilot tests when developing questionnaire. And lastly, whatever knowledge skill that you have acquired from this session, you are expected to apply them in developing a research questionnaire to be used for your research. Okay, what is meant by questionnaire? So a questionnaire is a document. It contains questions where you will collect information from respondents, and these data will be used normally for quantitative data analysis. That means we use statistics to analyze this data. However, questionnaire is not only meant for quantitative research, it is also being used for qualitative research. So for qualitative research, researchers also use questionnaire to collect data, and the type of questions used for quantitative research as compared to qualitative research differ. Of course, questionnaire is being primarily used in survey research. You receive questionnaire almost every day, right? We ourselves send questionnaire to other people, okay? And it is also being dominantly used in experimental design as well as quasi-experimental design. So what are the advantages of using questionnaire, and why do researchers incline to use questionnaire as a data collection technique? Okay, first and foremost is that questionnaire is cost effective. It doesn't cost you a lot to do a research. Nowadays we have so many online tools that are freely available that we can use for collecting data using questionnaire. All right, so the first advantage is that it is very cheap, low cost. It doesn't cost you a lot. Second advantage, or why people use questionnaire, is that the inflow of data is quick. That means you can get instant response. And you can get response or data from many participants or many respondents. And in terms of respondents, questionnaire doesn't take much of their time, okay, and they can always answer the questionnaire anytime, anywhere, according to their convenience. And data analysis of closed question is relatively simple. As I have already mentioned, questionnaire normally collect data meant for quantitative research. So through questionnaire, the data that we collected, we will analyze quantitatively using statistical procedure. So people use questionnaire because the data that you obtain is huge, enormous, and you can easily analyze from there using statistical procedure. Now, there are guidelines for developing questionnaire, and these guidelines need to be taken serious attention, because if the questionnaire is not well designed, not well developed, it can affect the quality of data that we collect as well as the response rate. So for that reason, when we design questionnaire, several factors need to be considered. Number one is prejudicial language. We have to avoid languages that contain sexist, disableist, or racist stereotyping. We do not want to offend the respondent. So we do not want to make the respondent feel guilty and they don't, we make them feel offended. So that's where can affect the response or the quality of responses given by the respondent. And secondly, the use of imprecision language. So we have to avoid language or words that are considered very vague, such as average, regularly, great deal. This is not very precise, and it can cause confusion to the respondent. So because of that, when we develop questionnaire, we have to try our level best that the language that we use is precise and specific. In a questionnaire also, we are advised not to develop questions which contains what we call leading questions. Leading question means what? That particular questions can lead the respondent to the answer. Example, a question like you can see on the slide: what do you think the organization, why do you think the organization has been successful in the past 3 years? So here you are giving clues, you are guiding the respondent. Why do you think the organization has been successful? So this is considered bias. So try to avoid creating or developing questions that giving clues to the respondent or participant to answer. And I'm sure you have heard this term double barrel. Double barrel means the use of the word and. You know, you have got two things here, but you have put it in one sentence. Okay, like the example that you can see on the slide here: do you like chocolate and strawberry ice cream? So you can see here chocolate and strawberry, these are two things, two different things. Okay, one may like chocolate, but the same person doesn't like strawberry. So how could he answer these questions precisely, accurately, when he likes chocolate but at the same time he doesn't like strawberry? So this is what we call double barrel questions or double questions. So such questions need to be avoided. And we are also advised not to develop questions that we call, that has this criteria, has this what we call assumptive questions. Okay, assumptive questions is a type of questions where you make assumption about people's belief. Okay, example like this: how often do you perform tahajjud? Okay, you make that assumption that the respondent perform tahajjud every day. This is not very this is not good, and we have to avoid such questions when developing our questionnaire. Hypothetical question also should be avoided. Hypothetical means you create a questions by putting hypothetical situation. Example: suppose you were asked to be something. Okay, so in that particular questions, you proceed with a hypothetical situation that you pose to the respondent. So you are putting the respondent in a very difficult situation. So this is not a truth, because this is actually hypothetical only. So respondent will have problem in answering such questions. And when developing questionnaire, we have to also consider the knowledge of the respondent. That means the targeted respondent must be the one who really experienced the situation, the phenomenon, and they also must have the knowledge about the situation or the situation or the phenomenon. They must have the knowledge, the experience about the situation. Then only they can provide or give you a genuine answer or genuine information. And the last point that we have to look into when we develop questionnaire, we have to avoid from developing questions that will require people or respondent to recall past events that had long gone, events that had happened like 4 or 5 years ago, 20 years ago. So this is putting the respondent in a very difficult situation. Okay, they have to remember, try to recollect. So this is not a very good way of developing questionnaire, and therefore we have to avoid. All right, another guideline or advice when developing questionnaire: you as a researcher, you yourself, you need to be clear about what information that you really want from the respondent. You yourself need to be clear. When you yourself are not clear, then it's going to be difficult for you to develop the item, the question in the questionnaire. So in order for you to be clear, you have to watch a video that talks about research design, or you have to be well versed about research design. So different methodology has got different design. Okay, I think I have talked about that research design before. Please refer to that notes of video. And the respondent must interpret the question in the way the researcher intended. That's why it is very important to do what we call pre-test and pilot test. So that pre-test and pilot test will ensure that the respondent really understand, really interpret as the way you intend it to be. Okay, I'll talk about that in my subsequent slide. And the third point is that respondent must construct an answer that contains information that the researcher really requested. That means whenever they give answer, this is what you as a researcher want. Okay. And point number 4, the researcher must interpret the answer as the respondent had intended it to be interpreted. Well, if it is a close-ended questions, probably there is not much an issue, but when it comes to open-ended questions, then probably it will be an issue. So that means I'll talk about that open-ended versus close-ended in my subsequent slide. Okay, now open-ended questions. In general, when you develop a questionnaire or in a questionnaire, you will be seeing two types of questions. Number 1 is called open-ended, and number 2 is called close-ended question. So open questions or open-ended questions is a questions like a subjective question in an examination. I'm sure all of you have attended examination before. You have come across open-ended questions where questions that starts with the word how, why, what. So you as a students can write whatever answers. Okay, so in the same light also in a questionnaire you can have open-ended questions. So in these open-ended questions you expect respondent to give whatever answers based on their opinion, experiences. Okay, it's up to them. Okay, so you have to prepare enough space for them. If you are using a paper-based questionnaire or you are using a web-based questionnaire, enough space must be given for them to give their answer. Or if you are doing interview, that means you must provide ample time, enough or sufficient time for the participant to respond to your question. So open-ended questions will yield to subjective answers. So that means answers given by the respondents or participants differ, okay, according to their knowledge and experience. Okay, so it's possible to have open-ended questions in a research questionnaire. So this is just an example taken from one of the textbooks that I have referred in creating these notes. Okay, what aspects of the government healthy living campaign do you find most useful? Okay, then please write down. So the respondent, the participant, has to write down his or her answer here. So the answer will be subjective, okay, depending on the respondent's experience and knowledge. Okay, as opposed to open-ended, we have a close-ended question. So close-ended question in a research questionnaire are actually similar to like a multiple choice question in an examination questions. Okay, during your diploma program, when you took quiz or test, I'm sure your lecturer had developed an objective or what we call multiple choice questions. So questions where answers are provided and you have to choose the most accurate answer from the option given. So this is what we call close-ended question. So these close-ended questions is one to which the respondent is offered a set of pre-designed answers or replies such as yes, no, true, false, multiple choice responses such as strongly disagree, disagree, undecided, agree, strongly agree, or is given the opportunity to choose from a selection of numbers representing strength of feeling or attitude. Okay, now close-ended questions can be divided into 4. Number 1 is called list questions. Number 2, category questions. Number 3, ranking questions. And number 4, skill questions. Let's look at the first one, list questions. So, list questions, you provide the questions, you provide the answers, and you ask the respondent to tick where to them are most appropriate. And they can tick more than one boxes. Normally, that is very normal. Okay, anything that really apply to them, they can tick. Like in this example, okay, 4 options of answers are given, so the respondent need to tick one or more responses which they think most accurate to them. Okay. Alright, now the second type, category questions. So category questions, normally you are given options or answers, but you are not supposed to tick more than one. You are required to only tick one answer. Okay, only one answer. Like in this example, how often in average week do you use our e-banking facilities? Please tick one response. So this is category questions, as opposed to the previous one, that is list question. List questions, you can tick more than once. More than one response you can tick. Whereas category questions, you are only required to tick one answer only. So normally, questions like this, list questions as well as category questions, this one fall under the nominal measurement. Remember, I talked about nominal, ordinal, interval, ratio. So list question as well as category question fall under this type of what we call nominal measure, nominal scale. All right. The next one, okay, list questions, category question. The next one, ranking questions. Okay, now ranking questions, this type of questions, you provide answers, options, list of answers to the user, but they are required to do the ranking. Okay, like here there are 6 options, so out of the 6, the respondent are required to rank which one is number 1, which one is second, which one is third, which one is 4th, 5th, and 6th. So they have to rank. Of course, this type of question is quite burdensome to the respondent, because they have to sort of spend a little bit more time to think and do the ranking. It's not quite straightforward. They have to pause and think and do the ranking. So this will require some time for the respondent to respond. This is the most common one, which is what we call skill question. So skill questions is also called matrix questions. So you have a list of what we call items. Okay, these are called items. I have been pleased with the emergency 24-hour call-out service. Electricity prices have been competitive with gas prices. Okay, these are called items or statements, or they are also being called elements. Okay, if you refer to a book written by Umar Sekaran, she used the term elements. Okay, elements or items. So each and every item is related to what we call Likert scale. Likert scale, where you have got labeling, and it is also called anchoring. Okay, like in this example, we have got 4 anchoring, starting from strongly agree, followed by agree, disagree, strongly disagree. So this type of question, the respondent has to tick one only for each item. What is the corresponding scale, or what is the corresponding response that he want to choose from? So he is not supposed to answer more than 2 answers for each item. If he answers more than 2 response or options, so that is considered invalid. So this is the most common one in our research, in our quantitative research, especially when you do survey. This type of questions, which is called scale questions or metric question, is the most common one. And if you can remember, I told you that for any variable that is not easily measured, or we cannot objectively measure, such as weight, height, or we do not have an instrument that can easily measure this variable. So we need to create items, what we call proxies or elements, several elements, several items that can be used to measure that particular variable. So variable that is considered abstract, such as satisfaction, commitment, all these variables cannot be easily measured. So you need to have items or elements that can represent them. So these elements or item, if you remember, I told you that at least you have to have two items. Of course, the more you have, the better it is, but 2 is the minimum, because having 2 items, we can measure the reliability, or what we call the Cronbach alpha of that particular variable. Alright, now this is another type of scale, which is called continuum. Okay, this is also like the previous one. This is almost the same, but instead of having each and every numbers label, this type of question only provide the labeling for the two extremes, the lowest and the highest. Like in this example, quick is on the one hand, and the other hand is slow. Friendly on one hand, the other extreme is discourteous. Informative on one hand, the other one is confusing. So this is what we call continuum scale. Actually, from the statistical point of view, this type of scale is better compared to the previous one. Compared to this continuum scale is better. And also, having more scale or having more options, 1 to 10, this is better as compared to having 4 options only. Okay. Alright, these are several responses that can be used to label our scale. Okay, if you use if you are looking into opinions, then you will be using terms such as very satisfied, okay, for your anchoring, somewhat satisfied, somewhat dissatisfied, very dissatisfied. If you are capturing or measuring knowledge, then probably you will be using the anchoring such as very familiar, somewhat familiar, not too familiar, okay. And then if you are looking into frequency of events or behavior, then you should be asking, or you should be labeling the items such as always, frequently, seldom, never, often, sometimes, rarely, never. Or if you want the respondent to do the rating, and then you can use the terms such as excellent, good, fair, poor, got better, got worse, stayed the same. Okay, very fair, fair, unfair, very unfair, high, medium, low. Okay, so these are other available options that you can use for labeling your Likert scale. Okay, but it all depends on what you really want to measure. Are you measuring opinions, or are you measuring knowledge, or are you measuring events or behavior or rating? Okay, and the wording of the statements or the items must be accurate also. Okay, please be careful when you create the items or the elements. If you read many research methodology textbook, okay, researcher unanimously agree that try to avoid from creating new instrument when you can find one. In other words, if there are available instrument that is allowed to be used by the creator, please adopt that, and probably you can adapt from that particular questions or items. Okay, creating a new one is not a good idea when there is already available questions that we can use or refer. Okay, now let's look at the differences in terms of the advantages and disadvantages between open and closed-ended questions. Okay, what are the advantages of open-ended questions? So it allows freedom of expression. That means respondent can express whatever from his or her heart. Okay, he can tell whatever from the bottom of his heart. And then it allows category cases to be established by the respondent. In other words, Based on the responses, we can do analysis, content analysis or thematic analysis. From there, we can identify the category, we can identify the theme, okay, based on the responses. And then open-ended question also allow any responses given by the respondent to be clarified. In other words, if they give any answers, and you can ask further for clarification. If you do questionnaire, if you do close-ended, you cannot get this, okay, only through open-ended. But that is when you do interview, and allowed for more depth, okay, for in-depth answers. However, in terms of the disadvantages, open-ended is time-consuming because the participant need to think, need to recall, need to write down, okay, sentences. So that is time-consuming. And secondly, when it comes to analysis, you have to do coding. The coding is quite challenging. You have to go through the transcription, line by line, word by word, and try to identify the appropriate theme or code for each and every sentence, okay. And then greater effort required by respondents, okay, more time needed by the respondent to give his or her answer. And if you do interview, you have to do follow-up interview, right? So more time needed, okay, for the respondent to participate, to respond. And then sometimes there could be misinterpretation. The way the respondent said or responded is not being accurately interpreted by the researcher himself, okay. And sometimes answers given by the respondent also is not crystal clear, and it has got hidden meaning. So unless the interviewer is someone who is very experienced, and then he can understand the point that the participant is trying to stress or emphasize. But if he is a novice researcher or someone who is lack of experience in doing interviewing, he could not actually understand fully, especially when the participant is not giving a straightforward answer, okay. What about close-ended question? Close-ended questions, I think I already mentioned this in my first or second slide, okay. It is easy to process answer, you can do the analysis easily, and then you can get a lot of responses quickly, and then respondent also can respond quickly, and then you can get a lot of responses. And then normally open-ended is quite straightforward, and then user can easily respond to the questions. However, in terms of the disadvantages, okay, loss of spontaneity of respondent. Spontaneous, it's very difficult for me to pronounce that word today. So difficult to make forced choice answers or mutually exclusive responses. Difficult to make forced choice answers or exhaustive responses. What do we mean by that? Okay, sometimes when you create a questionnaire, you have got like 4 options only. Example, strongly agree, agree, strongly disagree, disagree. Okay, that means you have got 4 choices here, and you are actually forcing the respondent to either disagree or agree. So it's very difficult. So in this situation, when you use even number of options, 4, 6, that means even number. So when you use even number of options, it is actually creating a forced choice. So in this situation, you are actually putting a problem to the shoulder of the respondent to decide, okay, whether to agree or to disagree. So the best is to have undecided option in between, okay. That is when you use odd number of responses, like 5, 7, okay, or 9. So you have got odd number. When you use odd number in between, you have an option what we call undecided. So neither agree nor agree, okay. And then sometimes when the questionnaire is not well developed, it can be very irritating, Okay, I think I've mentioned that, when the questionnaire is not being developed, you use, you don't follow the guideline. Okay, so it can be irritating. Example, you make an assumption or you create a question with hypothetical assumption. Okay, questions such as how many times do you perform tahajjud? That is a very irritating questions. Okay, and sometimes questionnaire can be very long. Okay, if it is not being well pre-tested or pilot tested, the questionnaire is long, and when it is very long, it can actually affect the responses given by the participant or respondent, especially in terms of the accuracy. Questionnaire that is too long, a respondent normally will not really very truthful in answering the questions. Okay, now there is a type what we call contingency questions. Contingency questions, or what we call filtering questions. This is where you create filtering questions to make sure that the respondent is really the one who is experiencing or doing that particular behavior. Okay, like in his example, I have given two example taken from one of the textbook that I referred, but of course this is not a good one. Have you ever smoked marijuana? Okay, this is not a good one. Yes, no. Okay. Have you ever been abducted by aliens? Yes, no. This is filtering questions. It's just like, when you want to do a survey to study, for instance, the mobile banking behavior. Okay, so you do not have the list of respondents who engage in the mobile banking. I think the bank will not provide you with the list, right? So in this type of research, you have to create this what we call contingency questions. Probably it will be among the earliest question presented in the questionnaire. You ask, do you engage in the mobile banking, or do you use mobile banking? If yes, you can continue answering these questions. If not, okay, they don't have to proceed in answering the questionnaire. Okay, that is called contingency question or filtering questions. Okay, when developing questionnaire, you have to also develop what we call cover letter. Okay, cover letter. Cover letter is very important because in this cover letter, you will inform the respondent the intention, the purpose, the aim of doing that research. You will introduce yourself, okay, and then you will give some insight about the research, and then other important information also you will include, such as how long, okay, the question, the questionnaire, how long does it take to fill up the questionnaire, and then to whom the questionnaire should be submitted to once it has been completed. And also you can ensure confidentiality, anonymity of the respondent, okay, in the cover letter. Okay, this is example of a cover letter of a questionnaire. Okay, first you can see the first set of message, what research is about, why it is useful. So you have to state in the first paragraph, okay, the purpose of the research and what is the benefit of conducting the research. Okay, second information that you have to highlight in your cover letter, you highlight the recipient's response is appreciated or valued, and you expect them to spare some time, okay, to answer the question. Now here you can see the in the sample, the author mentioned 5 minutes to complete. So how would you know the time needed for answering the questionnaire? This is where you have to do pre-test and pilot test. Then you can know the average time needed by respondent to in filling up the questionnaire. So you have to inform the respondent how much time they need to fill up the questionnaire. If you don't mention here, sometimes when the respondent fill up the questionnaire, and then first he thought that the questionnaire will be taking about 7-8 minutes, but after that more than 10 minutes, still he cannot complete the questionnaire. So he ended up not filling up all of the questions. All right. Yeah. Okay, the third message that you have to include in the cover letter is that you have to ensure confidentiality or anonymity. Okay, you have to mention that. That means the answers is only meant to be used for the research, and no one will be explicitly mentioned, okay, in the study. And the fourth message that you must mention is that whether you are going to give any form of reward or token for participating in the questionnaire, okay. And lastly, you have to mention to whom the questionnaire should be submitted, and in case that the respondent want to have more information or further inquiry, to whom the person should be contacting, okay. So providing instruction. In a questionnaire, there must be a clear instruction. How to fill up, okay, how to respond to the question. So that instruction must be crystal clear, okay. Sometimes you are collecting responses involving respondents who are not English native, not using English as their day-to-day language. So you may need to consider developing questionnaire that has got dual language, but that will be decided after you have completed your pre-test and pilot test. But whatever it is, the questionnaire should have a very clear instruction, okay. So if you have got several sections, each and every section must have got the introduction, and each and every section must have its own instruction. It's all right if you have to repeat the instruction. Sometimes section A and section B is almost same. The way you have developed and constructed the questionnaire is almost similar, and you have to repeat the instruction. It's all right. It's all right that you have to repeat the instruction over and over again. All right. When you develop a questionnaire, you have to do what we call pre-testing. Okay, pre-testing. And another one is called pilot testing. So there's a pre-test and there's a pilot test. Okay, I plan to create another video on how to do the pre-test, but for this session, I'll discuss why do we need to do pre-testing, okay? Because no matter how careful we as a researcher develop the questionnaire, there is always a possibility that we create error, okay? So we create mistake, such as ambiguous questions, okay? Questions that, the respondent cannot really answer or understand, okay? Or sometimes question that is actually very offensive, okay? So through the pre-testing, it will help you to refine the questionnaire so that respondent will really understand the questionnaire, then they can provide accurate and genuine answer. So this pre-testing will involve several strategies or several steps, okay. I'll talk about that in a different video. It involves some calculation also, and this pre-testing is very crucial, very crucial. So normally when you do pre-testing, you will engage experts in the field, 4 or 5 experts in the field, and also prospective respondent. So this pre-testing, you have to sit in front of them, go through with them the questionnaire. So through the pre-testing, you will look into aspects such as the instruction, whether it is clear or not, okay. You look at the style and the wording, okay, of the covering letter, okay, in terms of the length, in terms of the words, language, and then format, sequencing of the questionnaire, okay, the order of the questionnaire, and then number of items, okay, even whether the Likert scale use, is it appropriate to use even or odd. That one also you can find out through your pre-testing. So when you do your pre-testing, you engage experts and also prospective respondent, sit with them, go through them, ask them to go through the question over and over again, and ask them to give constructive feedback. So based on their feedback and comment, you have to revise and refine the questionnaire accordingly. Of course, I don't expect you to actually follow every single advice given by the respondent or the experts who were involved in the pre-testing, but at least you as a researcher, you know what is best. Okay, so you have to sort of select which is the most appropriate that can really make you to get the accurate information and get the highest response rate, okay, from the survey. Now, after completing a pilot test, after completing a pre-test, you will proceed to pilot test. Okay, so pilot test is actually a rehearsal of the actual study. Okay, it's a rehearsal study, okay, to the actual study. So it is just like an actual study, but the participant involved is not many. Okay, so the rule of thumb given by this author is between 30 to 100, but that depends on the sample size. If your sample size is huge, is big, then you can go to 100, but at least try to get 30. Why people choose 30? There's a theory in statistics, a central limit theorem. Okay, anything 30 and above is considered big or huge enough. That's why this 30 is a magic number. But I've seen some literature that state 10 is also accepted. Okay, other book I saw 50. Okay, but myself, I always advise my students to always use 30. Okay, what are the advantages of conducting pilot tests? Okay, pilot tests help the researcher to determine what resources are necessary for the actual study, for the full study. Okay, so when you do a pilot test, a rehearsed test, okay, that will help to determine what resources that you really need in order for you to conduct the full study. And then the pilot test will serve as a means to validate the field testing process. Okay, especially when you engage research assistant or interviewer. Okay, you prepare a questionnaire, a structured interview guide, and then you engage this interviewer, research assistant, to do the interviewing. So through pilot test, you can sort of validate whether that person is really competent to proceed with the actual study or not. And then you can also identify whether there's a flaw in terms of your sampling. Okay, when you distribute, say, to 30, and then you analyze the data, and then you know whether this is the correct sample that you have chosen. And then it also provides raw data to test data entry. So from pilot test, you prepare the master file for your data coding, and then from there, when you collect data for your actual study, you can easily enter the data right away because the master file is already ready through your pilot test. And through the pilot test also, you can measure the Cronbach alpha, which is actually a measurement of reliability. Remember, in any research, two important things that we have to always address. One is called validity. Okay, validity really measures what it is supposed to measure. Reliability is about consistency. So you do pre-test to address the validity, and this pilot test is to address the reliability. So both pre-test and pilot tests are equally important. Okay, but normally the Cronbach alpha value that is suggested by research methodologists is between 0.5 up until 0.7 at least. Okay, but to me that is that's not really very crucial, because as you know, this Cronbach alpha depends on many factors. Okay, and having 30 responses for you to evaluate the Cronbach alpha may not be giving you a very strong and solid results. Okay, so whatever value normally we can accept, but not too low. If it is too low, such as 0.2, 0.3, that shows something is just not right. Then you may have to revise or refine the questionnaire. Okay, How do you administer the questionnaire? So the questionnaire can be administered as self-administered or interviewer administered. So you can self-administer, that means you can use paper-based questionnaire, you can post, or you can use internet or intranet-based questionnaire. You can use online questionnaire, and then when either you use postal or you use internet or intranet-based, okay, you must of course you have to collect and you have to analyze the questionnaire. And then for interviewer administered questionnaire, you will engage interviewer, either you as the interviewer or you may engage someone else to do the interviewing. So the person or you yourself will be interviewing the respondent through telephone questionnaire. Okay, you can use structured interview, that means the questionnaire will provide you a guide for you to ask, that is also possible. Okay, all right, now when you distribute your questionnaire either through online or postal, paper-based, printed, okay, this is based on a study. They found out that normally after 10 days, okay, you expect to receive 50%, okay, of the final return, and then you need to give a reminder. That means after 17 days, okay, of your postal day, it is expected that you should get 80% of your final return. Okay, say if your final return is 100, you should expect to get 80 out of 100, and then the second reminder you should be getting few more. Okay, now in order to increase the response rate, you have to give reminder. So 1 week after initial posting, you send out another reminder, okay, and then another week you send out another reminder, okay, another week you send out another reminder. It's going to be third reminder. Now there is a term what we call non-response bias. Non-response bias is a situation where respondents do not participate or refuse to answer the questionnaire. So there is a way for you to examine whether the questionnaire is experiencing non-response bias. I hope I can create a video to explain to you how to actually detect whether the questionnaire that you have developed is experiencing non-response bias. That can be statistically checked after you have received the response. Okay, normally when you distribute your questionnaire, every time a response come in, you have to record it. Okay, say the duration of the data collection is 1 month, so you can compare responses that you receive between first week and the last week. So probably you can use independent sample t-test, and then you see whether there's a significant difference or not between the responses that you obtain in the first week compared to the last week. If there is a significant difference in majority of the variables, so that means there is an issue of non-response bias. But if there is no significant difference, not many, or significant difference is only very minimal, then you can assume that the questionnaire is not having an issue of non-response bias. Okay, nowadays it's very common to collect questionnaire using internet, okay, web-based. So when you create a web-based questionnaire, you have to take the advantages of this web-based, whereby you can use options such as pop-up menus, drop-down, okay, checkbox, okay, option button, radio button, so many options that are available. So this one you have to get the advice of those who are expert in human-computer interaction, so that the choice that you use for all these different types of tools is considered appropriate. Okay, and the way you create web-based questions is almost similar to the way you create conventional paper-based questions, but be careful when you use coloring, drop-down, checkbox, or radio button. Okay, don't simply for the sake of using it you use. You have to check on the suitability, and it is very important that you have to test, okay, the web page for the questionnaire that you have to that you have already developed, because you have to remember that the machines, the operating system of the respondents differ. Some user may be using Apple computer, others will be using Microsoft computer as an operating system. So the presentation, the interface may differ, so you have to really test. And nowadays people are using mobile handphones, so that too need to be looked into. Okay, whether the interface compatible to be used for mobile gadget or not. Okay, all right, I think that's the end of my discussion on the questionnaire for data collection. I hope what I have discussed have given you some insight on how to use questionnaire, and what are the critical aspect that you have to look into when developing questionnaire. So these are the list of references that I have looked when, or I have referred when developing this note. Okay, thank you for your attention, and hope to see you in my other video. Thank you, and assalamu alaikum.